Dr. Rossi, what can I do for you?
Listen, thanks for seeing me. This isn't going to take very long. I want you to issue a restraining order.
Well, sit down.
It's against this man, Chandler. You see, I left strict instructions at the hospital that Rachel Wells shouldn't have any visitors at all. And yet he came over and deliberately broke into her room.
Oh, wait a minute, Doctor. He is the girl's uncle. I think he's her guardian. You say he broke into her room? You sure about that?
He tricked himself past the head nurse and then just walked in on her. Then he tried to force her to leave the hospital.
You mean abduct her?
Listen, I'm trying to get the restraining order now as a temporary move to protect her while she's at the hospital. Actually, there's been a big history there of mistreatment. And Chandler, after all, is only her uncle by marriage. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's her legal guardian, right?
Well, the district attorney's office has nothing to do with the girl's guardianship. I don't see why you're telling me all this.
Because he's a dangerous man. I had to restrain him myself. Look, the nurse in Rachel's room saw the whole thing. And then there's this neighbor, a Mrs. Burroughs, who can testify that Chandler mistreated her many times before.
Well, I think the best thing for you to do is take it up with the juvenile authorities. They could petition the court for a hearing into the man's qualifications. If he's proved unfit, then the girl becomes a ward of the state and Chandler can't have anything to do with it.
Yes, but I don't have time for that. Don't you understand? Right now, there's a frightened girl over there at the hospital that needs protection. Now, I'm not going to stand by this time and watch someone get hurt because I haven't acted in time.
I think I do understand. Well, it's not really in my jurisdiction, but under the circumstances, I could bring it to Judge Andrews' attention. He could institute proceedings into the matter of the man's fitness, and meanwhile, I'll ask him to issue an order which would prevent Chandler from having any contact with the girl. How's that?
Well, that's great, thanks.
You know, in my job, sometimes we tend to bracket people. I was thinking of Rachel Wells mainly in connection with Allison McKenzie's disappearance.
Yeah, well, that may be a dead end. I don't think Rachel has any information about Allison.
She had the McKenzie girl's bracelet. She must know something, yes.
There's someone to see you, sir. Mr. Chandler.
Well, ask Mr. Chandler to wait for a minute, will you?
Yes, sir.
He certainly hasn't wasted any time, has he? Look, I'd like to stay. I'd like to stay and hear what he has to say.
No, I think he has a right to be heard alone. Besides, I'd like to find out what he might know about the McKenzie girl's bracelet, or even if he knew that his niece has it.
You will keep him away from the hospital, won't you?
You have my word.
Thanks, sir.
You can go in now, Mr. Chandler.
Come in.
I'm Rachel Wells' uncle, Jack Chandler.
Yes, sit down, Mr. Chandler.
That doctor, he was here about Rachel, wasn't he?
That's right.
I thought so. Who does he think he is? He's got her locked up in that hospital like a prisoner.
Well, she was hurt. He's her doctor.
Scratch on her hand. Does that give him the right to slam the door in my face? Because that's just what he did. Ordered me out of the place like I was scum.
But only after you'd forced your way in rather effectively, no?
Forced? I'm her uncle, Mr. Fowler, remember?
Well, the girl's Dr. Rossi's patient. If he decided no one should be allowed to see her, I'm sure he had a very good reason.
Oh, he had a reason, all right. But I'm betting it wasn't medical. Rachel isn't hard to look at, Mr. Fowler, if you know what I mean.
I'd be rather careful about saying something like that if I were you, Mr. Chandler.
I should be careful. What about him? Look, Mr. Fowler, I've come to take her home. I want to know how soon we can get started.
I'm afraid it's not going to be that simple. See, it's been alleged that you mistreated the girl.
Who said that?
A number of people.
That's a lie.
Well, perhaps so. I'm sure you'll welcome a chance to clear the matter up. Dr. Rossi's asked me to petition the court for a hearing on Rachel's custody. I told him I would.
Just a minute. My farm's Rachel's home. It may not be much, but she's always had food in her mouth and a roof over her head. If it hadn't been for my wife and me, she'd have had pretty near nothing. Lucy was her guardian. I got papers to prove it. Now, whoever said...
You don't seem to understand, Mr. Chandler. Apparently, Rachel doesn't want to continue to live on your farm.
I can't believe that.
Why'd she run away?
She's always running away, hiding. That's just her way.
Well, this time it wasn't a game. She didn't intend to come back.
How do you know what she would have done, Mr. Fowler? They hadn't netted her like a lake trout and brought her here?
You boarded up your house.
I did. There's been a lot of vandalism around our place. You look sideways and somebody steals a screen right out of your windows. I got a handyman named Jefferson. He had the key to the place if Rachel would come home. There was food for her. She wasn't overlooked. You got any children, Mr. Fowler?
No.
Well, maybe if you did, you'd understand what a handful they can get to be these days. Rachel isn't really a bad girl, but she had a sizable piece of misfortune when her folks died. Lucy and I tried to make it up to her, but it wasn't that easy. She was so wild they wouldn't keep her in school. Lucy schooled her. And I tried my best to give her the things her own mother and father would want her to have. Look, Mr. Fowler, it was my wife's wish that we continue to provide a home for her. And I'm gonna do just that.
And how does it happen that it took you so long to turn up, Mr. Chandler? I mean, that's not exactly the behavior of a man who's deeply concerned.
My wife died, Mr. Fowler. I went to fetch my sister up in Maine. She's going to keep house for me now. She's a good woman. She'll make a fit home for the girl. As a matter of fact, if there's nothing against it, I'd like to take her over to see Rachel right now.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to stay away from Rachel until the hearing. Otherwise, I'll have to ask for a court order.
Isn't that a little like taking sides, Mr. Fowler?
No, it's customary in matters like this.
All right. I'll do as you say. I can see what I'm up against here.
The hearing will probably be scheduled for sometime next week. Will you be staying in town?
No. Got to see about my sister settling in. You can reach me by phone.
All right.
Understand me, Mr. Fowler. I got no ill will toward you. I understand you're only doing your job.
Thank you. Oh, in connection with my job, I want to ask you some questions of a different sort when you come back into town.
What about?
Allison Mackenzie.
Who's that?
Don't you read the papers, Mr. Chandler? Allison Mackenzie's a girl who's been missing from Peyton Place for some time now. We've had a big search going on for her.
Wow. What's that got to do with me?
When we found your niece, she had a bracelet that belonged to Allison.
Where'd she get it?
Well, she says she found it on the road, but we think that's a rather unlikely possibility. You see, this bracelet was a particular keepsake of the Mackenzie girls. She almost never took it off voluntarily.
I don't know anything about it. Rachel's always been kind of a wild girl. I never knew half the places she goes or whatever. If she did see the girl, I don't know why she'd lie about it.
No, we don't either, Mr. Chandler. But if she is lying about it, we intend to find out why. I'm sure you'll want to cooperate with us.
Sure. Anything I can do, I'll be glad to.
Thank you. Good day, then.
Day?
Preview from the continuing story of Peyton Place.
You put yourself in my hands, Weber, and I could have squeezed you to death out of sight behind my back.
You know how the imagination plays funny tricks when you don't know exactly what's happened. But if you know anything at all about her, or anyone who does, tell me.
Look, Sammy.
I know it's wrong.
Well, then why do you...
Because I just can't seem to stay away from you.